ANC Youth League is convinced that although difficult, the decision to recall Comrade Thabo Mbeki was one of the best decisions the ANC has taken. The decision is in the interest of unity, cohesion, and progress of the organization and will go a long way in ensuring stability within the movement. The ANC Youth League celebrates the fact that the decision to recall President Mbeki was influenced by our organization, respecting and honoring due processes of the ANC. The ANC Youth League is not ashamed of its capacity to influence decisions in the ANC.
That is Julius Malema at the time as president of the ANC Youth League. Let's welcome Reverend Frank Chikane. Good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So the journey started when? When did you start writing the book?
Well, I intended writing a book in any way when I left government.
Okay.
So the events of September 2008 just precipitated that. And after leaving government, I began to write.
Okay. Yeah. How was it? Was it dramatic? Was it emotional? Because presumably when you started writing, all of the feelings of the time came flowing back by the avalanche.
Well, obviously it was an emotional moment. It was extraordinary. I think in this country, we have not had an experience like that before, where a president is removed under circumstances that he was removed. I mean, he had 7 months to go.
Yes.
And then suddenly he got removed. So I had to think carefully about it. I'm the person who was in the center. I'm the person who had to manage the transition.
Yes.
And I'm the one who knows exactly what happened. And I thought the nation needs to know.
Yeah.
And I decided I was going to write about it.
I see in the preface you're accused of disloyalty to the ANC at some level.
Yeah, there were other people who thought if you write about that event, you are disloyal. Obviously, I mean, it's just personal opinions.
Okay.
But I mean, there's no disloyalty about this.
Yeah.
Somebody was going to write about this story in any way. Somebody was going to interview me and go and write a book. And I thought, well, the time has come for us to write our story. And that's a critical part of my commitment that South Africans must write their story. And I thought I'm better placed to write that story.
Yeah, some are saying the truth is twisted in the book. Some are saying that some of the facts and some of the information is not what it was. Is that correct?
You know, there is no way in which you could write about your experience and not have other people thinking otherwise. Even if we're in the same room, we'll interpret the events differently. It's worse if you are in different rooms, in different places. And I do say it in the book. This is my experience, and I'm writing about what I witnessed, experienced. It's not a research. It's not about interviews of other people.
It's not a third-party story.
It's not a third-party story. I'm writing my story. So somebody could have another story to write about the same event. And they've got the right to write about the same event. But what I know is what I've written about.
And you stand by it?
And I stand by it.
So the idea that President Mbeki is now going to be removed, how do you in the presidency get to know about it? How does it get communicated to you before the actual removal?
Well, the book details that.
Yes.
I mean, that particular morning, SMSs began to flow around.
This is the Saturday morning?
Yeah, Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Early morning.
Okay.
We got SMSs going around. The decision has been made.
Yes.
And that's how I got it.
Okay.
And of course, my staff began to communicate, the advisors, and it's detailed in the book.
Yeah.
And we had to decide as to what do you do? I mean, I'm in charge of the president's life. I'm in charge of his movements and what happens.
Where was he going to go at the time? I mean, in terms of just the presidential calendar and the program.
Well, the weekend was okay, but the following week he was going to the United Nations.
Yes.
And he had a major African forum there, which he was going to participate in. So you had to think about, if he's removed, what's going to happen with all the responsibilities that the president has to undertake? Remember, this removal had nothing to do with what he was doing in government.
Yes.
It had to do with dynamics within the party. And because of that, you were running a normal operation in government, and suddenly this happens.
Yes. There was no vote of no confidence in parliament or anything like that.
No vote of no confidence, nothing. It's a straightforward party matter.
Yes.
And I'm in government. So I had to manage it. If you're Secretary of Cabinet, some people said, why didn't you resign? I said, you can't resign as Secretary of Cabinet if there's a crisis.
Yeah.
When there is no cabinet, the Secretary of Cabinet takes responsibility. I'm the one who has to manage the departure of a president and manage the swearing in of a new president.
Okay.
And so I had to take responsibility directly, and therefore I had no other options other than make sure that this country is stable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about departure of the president. Let's take a look at this clip where President Mbeki, on the Sunday night, I think it was, he then announces his resignation. Let's have a look.
Fellow South Africans, I have no doubt that you are aware of the announcement made yesterday by the National Executive Committee of the ANC with regard to the position of the President of the Republic. Accordingly, I would like to take this opportunity to inform the nation that today I handed a letter to the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Baleka Mbete, to tender my resignation from the high position of President of the Republic of South Africa, effective from the day that will be determined by the National Assembly. I have been a loyal member of the African National Congress for 52 years. I remain a member of the ANC and therefore respect its decisions. It is for this reason that I have taken the decision to resign as President of the Republic, following the decision of the National Executive Committee of the ANC.
What was the mood like?
Well, you would imagine that we had to work on that presentation itself, because I mean, he's resigning as president.
Yes.
He's not resigning as party. So it still was my responsibility. And the president had to go and make the statement, come back to the house, find us waiting there. And you can imagine the emotions that go with it. But he did an honorable thing.
Yes.
He was quite clear that he does not want any destabilization of the country because of him. He has worked for peace. He's known for working for African Renaissance.
Yes.
Resolutions of conflicts on the continent. He was not going to be a source of conflict, and he decided he was going to accept.
That's very composed, though.
Yeah.
For that kind of time, that kind of pressure, that kind of decision.
Yeah, but it's in the nature of Mbeki, isn't it? I mean, he takes things as they come. He's not emotional.
Yes.
And when he makes a decision, he makes it, and he went to make the announcement. And yeah, it's done.
So at the time, before, when he went to make the statement and then he came back to the house, was there any time when there were tears flowing, anything that was sort of an emotional transition from what has been and the impact of a decision of the scale?
No, actually, when you read the book, there's a part that describes this moment in detail. And I do take the scriptural, biblical reference there.
Okay.
That it was almost like the people who were waiting there, the disciples of Christ sitting in a room.
Yeah.
And listening to this and having to receive him to come back and say, now, you've done it, and what do we do from now?
Where to from here?
Yeah, where do we go from now? And again, it became my responsibility.
For you, it had to be business as usual. You had to then effect the stuff at the United Nations and all of the other things with the incoming president.
I had no luxury to think about any other thing. I mean, this was a critical moment in the life of this country.
Yes.
The president has just resigned, and you have to firstly make sure the stability. You must make sure that his program is reviewed and managed. You must make sure that there's going to be another president coming in and how you manage that. The whole week was really about managing it. And Mbeki kept on saying, make sure there's stability.
Yes.
Don't want
That's the single most important thing.
Single most important thing.
So the announcement has been made.
Yeah.
Now you are at the house with him.
Yeah.
Who are you taking instructions from at that time?
No, remember, it was an intention to resign.
Yes.
Subject to
A
parliamentary processes.
Yes.
So he remained president until the last moment.
Yeah.
Up to Wednesday night.
But aren't you taking instructions from Sawa Street as well?
No.
Because not yet.
No, because I'm Secretary of Cabinet.
Nobody is telling you about...
My instructions come from the president.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can't take instructions from anywhere.
Okay. So the decision's been made. He's still president.
Yeah.
What then? What happens about the United Nations trip?
Well, we had to decide. There was a decision that he shouldn't continue those activities, and that's where I come in and say there's a problem about somebody from outside deciding
yes.
which activities the president can carry out, which activities he can't carry out.
Okay.
Because he's still president. Until he ceases to be a president, he
yes.
still has a responsibility. But again, the president said, I don't want to create any instability. I'm prepared to live in peace and manage the appointments. So we had to manage the appointments. At that time, Minister Zuma was already in the UN.
Yes.
And she had to decide whether she's staying or not staying. She's still a minister, not a minister. And then we send the message that she should continue working as if nothing is happening until otherwise stated.
During that time, did you think of resigning? I mean, I understand stability. No. I understand all of the other things. Did you think, this upsets me, I must go too?
I think I have a commitment. It upsets you, but you've got a commitment for the country.
Yes.
And I'm a public servant. Remember,
okay.
I was not a political appointee.
Yes.
I was not elected.
Yes.
I'm a public servant, and a public servant's responsibility is to run government.
And to continue to serve the public.
I was part of the leadership of the Directors General. I had to make sure that all the Directors General are in their place.
Yes.
And that when the ministers leave, it's the Directors General. The nation depends on the Directors General to make sure that the country runs.
Okay.
And that was my responsibility.
We've taken 10 minutes to talk about 8 days in September. Thanks for being concise. Okay. I'd like to urge you to go and get a copy of the book. It's a fascinating tale. Frank Chikane, author of this 8 Day in September, the removal of Thabo Mbeki, an incredible story. It's got 17 chapters. There's a second part of the book that's coming out in September. That's all I've got to say for you. It is now